All right. So today we're going to talk about two different forms. One created by Terrence Hayes, The Golden Shovel. In The Golden Shovel, it is using the lines from Gwendolyn Brooks's poem, We Real Cool. And each line ends with one word from that poem until the entire poem is complete. If you remember the poem, We Real Cool, I'll say it very quickly. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon. And um, Terrence Hayes made this poem using couplets, and those words to end it, you can find it in the syllabus. 1981. When I am so small, Da's socks cover my arms. We cruise at twilight until we find the place, the real mean lean, bloodshot and translucent with cool. His smile is a gold-plated incantation as we drift by women on bar stools with nothing left in them but approachlessness. This is a school I do not know yet, but the cue sticks mean we are rubbed by light, smooth as wood, the lurk of smoke thin to song. We won't be out late. Standing in the middle of the street last night, we watched the moonlit lawns and a neighbor strike his son in the face. A shadow knocked straight. Da promised to leave me everything. The shovel we used to bury the dog, the words he loved to sing, his rusted pistol, his squeaky Bible, his sin. The boy's sneakers were light on the road. We watched him run to us looking wounded and thin. He'd been caught lying or drinking his father's gin. He'd been defending his ma, trying to be a man. We stood in the road and my father talked about jazz, how sometimes a tune is born of outrage. By June, the boy would be locked upstate. That night, we got down on our knees in the room. If I should die before I wake, Da said to me, it will be too soon. 2. Let's not read 2. Let's stick with the 1, because it is pretty lengthy, right? What I love about this, and we talked about this briefly yesterday, is the storytelling that happens, and this not the original voice that is obvious, but the nod to Gwendolyn Brooks and the permission that she gives to use your original voice, your own voice, and how we bring in our own heirlooms, right? What is an heirloom that we're bringing into this new contemporary literary canon? And Terrence Hayes does it eloquently, but also genuinely. It feels organic. It doesn't feel forced. So the one thing I'm really interested in when looking at form, especially because I come from a place where people are often telling me that if you're not writing the Shakespearean sonnet, if you aren't writing the Italian sonnet, if you aren't writing, the pantoum, with this language in mind, with this like very, I don't want to say, it's not disinfectant, but you know what I'm saying? It's very clean and anywhere USA type of poetry where you never know the region, you never know the music that was happening then, you don't know what food they were eating, you can't really tell what neighborhood they live in or were moved out of. Sometimes forms feel like that to me, and this form doesn't allow that. It does not allow the whitewashing. It does not allow the one stamp for all people. It allows nuance, and it allows class, and it allows all of the things that make us, make up our cultures, so that we can have a full-bodied experience when writing. We can have a full-bodied experience when reading, and we can have a full-bodied experience when sharing. And there is no one way to tell a story. The form is helpful in that it guides the writer to the meat of the story. It's necessary to cut out the fat. It's necessary to say, okay, I may be using too many words, or I may be hiding behind this image. So I love form for that, for the brevity or the density that it guides us. But I do not like, and maybe that's my own peeve. I do not like feeling like there's only one way to say a thing. So for that, I love the hustle, right? We read Patricia Smith's Hip Hop Hustle yesterday, and another prime example of keeping your language, keeping the tone and the sound and the smell, of the Midwest, to the point she even put dialogue in the midst of a hustle. And she didn't let the form dictate how she spoke, but she did let it guide her in the story that she was telling. I'm going to read a poem that I put into the chat box here, and it's by Yona Harvey, Cave Canem Fellow. She actually just finished writing this dope joint with Roxane Gay, Black Panther. I think it's Wakanda, right? Anyway, the name of this poem that I'm going to be reading is Gingivitis, Notes on Fear. And this poem is in 2 different columns. It is a contrapuntal and also a magnificent way to tell a story. If you're not familiar with the contrapuntal, I'm going to spell it for you. CONTRAPUNTAL. Contrapuntal is the one poem. Well, it looks like one poem, 1 page, 2 columns. 1 column has 1 voice, the second column has another voice, and once you read from left to right, that is a poem in itself. So it ends up being 3 poems on one page. Gingivitis, Notes on Fear. I hesitate invoking that, my daughter's mouth, not her first vanity. She tastes and smooths her chin this way and that. Bones replacing the fallen. It repairs itself, too, forming new words, brushing past. What is the tongue between trauma and incident? And think, there is so much to fear. And now my second born. Brush, he says. Double emptiness open in the bathroom mirror, but first blood inkling with her tongue. She turns, anticipating her future new. If the body survives, pillars, wider, stronger. Adolescent declarations, seasoned gums. Span, terror, accident, on these things, how will we fear it all? My son, if I don't, a disease will attack my gums. I hesitate invoking that doubled emptiness, open my daughter's mouth in the bathroom mirror, not her first vanity, but first blood inkling she tastes and smooths with her tongue. She turns her chin this way and that, anticipating her future, new bones replacing the fallen. If the body survives, it repairs itself, 2 pillars, wider, stronger, forming new words, adolescent declarations, brushing past seasoned gums. What is the tongue span between trauma and terror, incident and accident? Think on these things. There is so much to fear. How will we fear it all? And now my second born, my son. If I don't brush, she says, a disease will attack my gums. Whew, I love that poem. Okay, so look, the thing about contrapuntals is it's like Sudoku meets crossword puzzle meets the story you wish you had the balls to tell meets the story you have the chutzpah to tell. And anything and everything can happen. It's a really, really fun way to investigate language and stories. And sometimes we have those moments where we're having 2 different conversations at once, and we don't really know how to let both of those conversations live in a poem or live on the page. And this is a great way to investigate how they both can live on the page. And while simultaneously happening, celebrate each other and strengthen each other. Another great contrapuntalist is, our brand new Pulitzer Prize winner, Tyehimba Jess. The name of that book is Olio. I'll put that into your chat. That's Olio. And he did a great thing using archival work, using stories of past slaves and writing about, using their voices to write about the then to the now. Really cool work. So yeah, the contrapuntal, devastating, heartbreaking, and amazing. You can break open this poem so many times, so many ways. Just in the opening, I hesitate invoking that double emptiness. She already invites us into the idea that we're having two conversations. And it presents itself as, is it a column? Is it gaps in the teeth? It paints lovely on the page, right? And there's the moments where these singular lines do so much work that you go back to it. There is so much to fear. How will we fear it all? Think. There is so much to fear on these things. How will we fear it all? When I'm looking at a contrapuntal, I'm wondering not only how can I write one that doesn't suck, but how can I write one that invokes that type of urgency that Yona did in this poem, Gingivitis Notes on Fear, to talk about blood and death. And hey, Benjamin, you okay? Somebody's on. I can hear. Okay, cool. To talk about blood and death and legacy. And it's not an effortless thing, but it feels like it when you're reading it, right? It almost feels like, of course, that's the next thing. But I never anticipated it. I never expected it. And I love the capability that the contrapunto gives. Obviously, the author is super skilled, but it also feels like the contrapunto not only allows, but requires that type of, dexterity with the language. So if I'm looking here, there's a moment where the question is imposed. And as a writer, I'm always having that, I think I have a natural fear, like, is this question necessary? And when I read this, it felt like, but of course, right? What is the tongue span between trauma and terror, incident and accident? Think on these things. There's so much fear. And so it almost feels like she understands that you're probably scared of what I'm about to do right here, right? This may go against the grain. This may go against everything that you've learned, but trust, trust the words, trust the blueprint of what's happening here. Another great person to check out when it comes to contrapuntals, I have to find a list. Oh, C.M. Burroughs, C.M. Burroughs. She's a Cave Canem fellow and also a educator at Columbia College Chicago. She has a great book called The Operating System and does some interesting work in there. The contrapuntal allows the language to happen in one full story and then two sporadic fragments, but also poems that are happening, which makes it, we talked about this before, this makes it very, very, it makes it very hard for you to use words that aren't necessary. So, we talked, who said that yesterday? I think it was Benjamin talking about the economy of language. And I think this is one of those things where there is no word here that should not be here. There's no room for it, right? Everything is on display. Nothing can hide. The colons are even doing work. The ampersands are even doing work. And it's nothing is missed. Nothing is missed. There's no step missed in this piece. So I would love to hear from you what you're seeing in the new poem. We talked yesterday briefly, but what you're seeing in the new poem would be fun for me to hear. So come back in. Hi, Nicole, Claudia.
Hi.
Jay. So what are your thoughts on the contrapunto? Uh-oh, we can't hear you, Claudia. Nada.
So I think that it's very new, nothing that I've ever seen before, but it's also very intriguing. And I think that the work that Yona Harvey does is out of this world. This is the first that I'm hearing of her, but yeah, I'm very intrigued with the contrapunto.
Cool.
I tried to write one and I was able to go across, but I didn't get the down part, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, how to make it go across and also down. Mm-hmm. But I like what you said about it being kind of, a strong narrative, but then 2 fragments, I guess, going down. Mm-hmm. So I haven't quite figured out how to do that, but I would love to, though. I love that idea of like how the, stanzas kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. I think we also kind of get lost what poems should sound like. It resists that, right? So when you have things like, I hesitate invoking that my daughter's mouth, not her first vanity, it jumbles around a little bit, even though it makes complete sense. But usually would that be the way the poem happens? Maybe not. But it's still a whole entire picture that's happening within itself. So yeah, fragment is the easiest way for me to think of it, because it's almost, it's not broken, right? It's just these small pieces that'll make up the story. It's almost like a phone conversation with bad reception, right? Which sometimes leads into an entirely different story. You're like, oh snap, I didn't know you said all of that, but when I hear these things, word, that could be its own story. But she's very, very, very particular about what goes where. And it should be. So when you're writing it, I'd love to see your contrapunto. Please send, Nicole.
Okay. Tiana Clark had this one poem, and I feel like it was about menstruation, maybe like with her aunts or something, but it was like, you read most of the poem across, but then at the very end of each of the lines was like, I think it was italicized, and it was unbelievable. You read it across, but then you could read that one strand down. I was like, oh my gosh, like blew my mind. I was like thinking, how did she do that? Like, how did she write it? Like, I was trying to figure out like what she wrote first, like, did she write that piece going down and then the pieces into it? It was, I couldn't figure it out. So I love the idea. I haven't quite figured it out.
Right. So that's present in the Terrence Hayes piece, correct? Where he's using the golden shovel, and he has the words that he has to use to end the line to assure that it is a golden shovel, and invoking the Gwendolyn Brooks poem. So in that case, I think he had to write those words down and then write to the word. I'm not sure of the piece you're speaking about, but I think that sometimes when we're writing, our line breaks can happen differently. And because the line breaks can happen as you choose, 2 poems can then happen at the line of the poem, and then the far right edge of the poem can make another story. How about you, Jay? You there?
Yes, I am. I've actually been reading it again and again to myself. I usually have to read things 7, 8 times to start actually getting it in. But my first initial thought was when you read it, I actually for a second took my eyes off the form and just kind of closed my eyes. And it was just such a beautiful fragmentation reading each column. But what really just impressed me, and everybody has said this, how it just became almost totally clear on that third when we started reading horizontally, where I think initially I was the first column and the second column, I was piecing things together, not fully understanding, but pleasant and like happy in my not fully understanding. And then it was just an immense joy when when we read across and it just put itself together. And it, I can't imagine how much work goes into this and how many crossouts and
Word. There's a lot, right? Yeah. But you said it great. The fragmentation is really what keeps the engine running. You know that, okay, this is building into something. But the real surgical precision happens in the way in which she cut up those two columns. And I think we all have the capacity to do it. It may take us a couple, some may take a couple of weeks, but it can happen. I wrote my first contrapuntal maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And it took me a month to write it and not hate it. You know what I mean? Like to write it and not feel like, oh, this was a workshop attempt, but write it and love it. Like, oh, this is a body.
And that's, no, finish. I'm sorry.
And look, and I was going to say, and look at the 2 arms, look at the arms. That's a pretty baby. Like all of the things that happen when you actually love something that you create.
I think
you're saying
what's also, that's another thing is that I think we're so, focused on being knee deep in the form and knowing the form and following the rules that I think for a minute I totally forgot another equally as important picture, which is the fact that what comes of it has to be, it's, you know what I mean? That writing a contrapuntal is great, but writing a kick-ass contrapuntal is a whole different animal.
Yeah, it's godly. It's so good. It's so good. That's what I feel about most of the forms, though. I'm sitting in these MFA classes, and they'll show you something, and you're like, "This is soulless. Like, where is the soul of the piece?"
Right.
I get it. That's a bird. That's nature. Got it. Amen. We're here. But what's at stake? Where's the urgency? Why do I care? You know what I mean? And we're living in a time now where, like I said, again, all of our stories matter, and it's just about finessing the form to assure that your story is a part of the canon.
Yep.
I think I'm going to stop broadcasting now. That was like a tweetable moment. I'm going to tweet that.